Let's get to the story of the day. My first experience came when I was about 6 or 7 years old. In Madison, Wisconsin, I was attending St. James Catholic Church. I recall going up to light a candle for the Virgin Mary after the service. I was praying after I lighted the candle when I heard her speaking to me. I recall being entranced by a really sweet, beautiful voice in my head. It was telling me that I would be called upon and that I should be patient. I wish I could recall more details, but I can't. I remember feeling as if time had stopped and it was just me and her in the chapel when she was talking to me. I even saw her statue grin at me. Needless to say, even as a 6-year-old, I didn't tell anyone because statues aren't supposed to talk, let alone wink at you. I had suppressed this memory till my next encounter. Second encounter. I had another incident when I was 27 years old. I had just had my second kid at the time, and I recall sitting in my rocking chair and watching Ronald Reagan's choice for the first teacher in space. When Krista McCullough was summoned to take the job, a sense of impending dread extended from my head to every cell in my body. Someone had placed their palm on my head and allowed this goo of doom to enter my body. I couldn't move. I was transfixed as this sensation passed through me. That seemed unbelievable to me. I knew she'd perish if she boarded the space shuttle. I recall telling myself that this couldn't keep occurring. I had no idea what to do when I was discharged. Should I phone NASA and tell them what happened? Would they believe me? Who am I other than a simple homemaker with 2 little children? I was scared that if I phoned NASA, they'd send the cops and I'd be in big trouble, so I didn't tell anyone. I had no idea that others were having similar experiences and were calling NASA. I missed the first glimpse of the shuttle blasting off on the morning of the launch. I recall collapsing to the floor when I found out what had happened, and I made a pledge to God that the next time He made contact with me, I would listen. It was at this point that I understood we weren't alone and that something else was going on that I didn't comprehend. That's when I remembered my conversation with the Virgin Mary. This encounter, I feel, was my enlightenment. Third experience. When I was 33 years old, I experienced an even more spectacular experience. I recall waking up one morning and seeing a beautiful white light in the corner of my room as I was getting out of bed. At first, I believed it was just the sunlight, despite the fact that I'd never seen sunlight like that before. I looked at my door and noticed that it was halfway closed. How did all of that light get into my room? Then I realized it had to be the spirit of a friend of mine who died when she was 19 years old. I remembered how lovely the light was as I looked at it. This light was really bright, but it did not harm my eyes. It stayed with me. I could still see it when I closed my eyes. It was then that I collapsed back into the bed and realized I couldn't move. It felt like I was being restrained. Then I saw images of men and heard a voice in my head speaking to me again. This voice was telling me about this man, who he was, and when we would meet. This voice told me about his temperament, appearance, heritage, and what he would say to me if we met. This voice indicated that this man needed to be shown the right way in life, and that he would provide me with the passion that I lacked. I recall shaking my head from side to side. No, I would never associate with someone like this. When I was finally liberated, I thought, is this a genuine thing? Such things do not occur. I was too terrified to inform anyone for fear that they would think I was insane. I put it off and didn't think about it again until 6 months later when I met this man. He was exactly as I'd seen him, and he even stated exactly what the voice had told me he would say to me. I was completely taken aback. I recall promising God that I would follow through, and I did. Over the course of 6 years, I worked very hard to assist this man. We were in and out of a relationship, and the last time we got together was when I had the NDE-like experience. Fourth encounter. My near-death experience occurred when I was 40 years old. I had reconnected with this dude, Philip. I recall being at a low place because no matter what I tried, Philip continued returning to his old habits, despite telling me that he had discovered God. True, but things started happening to him that I'm sure God orchestrated to show him that he needed to spend time with me. But Philip continued to hang out with his pals. I remember nights when I just wept myself to sleep, pleading with God to take me home because I couldn't handle it any longer. One night, as I begged God to take me home, I suddenly fell asleep, and the next thing I knew, I was in a location surrounded by white light. I took a look around and noticed that this light reminded me of the one in my bedroom years ago. It was at this point that I realized I knew where I was. I was at home. I also recognized I no longer had a body, and the sensation of pure ecstasy was indescribable because I was no longer confined by a body. I have no words to describe how I felt. Feelings are felt to the utmost when you're free of the body. It was at this instant that I understood I was in the reality. I kept telling myself that they had to show me this because I was about to die and they didn't want me to be scared. I'm still here, so I know it wasn't that. I began to glance around and noticed individuals of various hues clustered together, chatting amongst themselves. They could be masculine or female. I recall one of them being a delicate olive green color and clutching a staff. I wondered how these aliens could be communicating since they didn't have eyes, ears, mouths, or hands. I decided to check what color I was, so I stretched a portion of myself out and discovered that I was a bright, scorching pink. I recall laughing since that was a hue that I would never wear on Earth. The next thing I knew, I was being drawn into the light, and what a magnificent sensation it was. The light entered me and enveloped me in unconditional love. I became a part of it, and it taught me that we needed to see with our emotions rather than our eyes. We must love selflessly and frequently, to be sympathetic and understanding, and to perceive with our hearts rather than our eyes. We are all linked. We are acquainted. This loving light was all of us, all things. It was too gorgeous and perfect for me to leave. I felt myself drawn toward the gathering of beings I had observed earlier. I was being drawn into a location that looked like an entrance of some type, and when I was above the opening, I was afraid I'd fall through it. I was floating there when I noticed another entity hurry up to me. I was being drawn to this entity that was royal purple in color. I heard this being's name, Kevin, and the olive green being say something to me telepathically. This is the one you'll be seeing next. I was thinking to myself, do you want me to spend time with my ex-brother-in-law? At the time, that was the only Kevin I knew. As it got closer, I recognized it as being a different being. It was fantastic when we embraced. It seemed like 10 billion explosions of love energy exploded all around and within me. Ecstasy personified. It was boundless love. That is the greatest way I can explain it. Nothing we can experience on Earth compares to this sensation. I didn't want to let this being go. When I come home, I can't wait to hug everyone. The next thing I knew, I was in a long hall with one end that seemed to go on forever. I saw a throne with a being seated on it. I didn't glance up to see its face since I knew I shouldn't. I was bouncing all over the place because I knew I was in God's presence. Oh my God, it's God, I kept saying to myself again and over. I heard God's voice as I began to calm down. I have no words to describe it other than that it was alive. It felt as if God could end everything on earth with the power of a single word. You were aware of the strength of his voice. I was humiliated. I felt small, insignificant, and yet cherished. This voice spoke to me from above. It seemed as if God showed me a body on a throne to give me something to grasp while all of this was going on. He asked how things were going with Philip, and I told him everything was okay. God then asked, "Tell me how he's truly doing." I felt that I couldn't deceive God, so I told him that things were not going well. God then inquired what I imagined would happen if he separated me from him. At the time, I believed God wants me to return home, and I stated that if I died, Philip would completely lose it. Then God said, "I believe I know my son better than that." He went on to remark that what was crucial was that Philip had him completely in his heart and that he would have to take over. He asked whether that was okay with me. I concurred. "What do you want?" God then inquired. It was unbelievable to me. Here I was, given the greatest gift of all, knowledge of heaven, understanding that we do not die, and knowing that God wants to know what I want. All I could think of was how much I wished my children were present. I told him this, and the next thing I know, I awoke with a start in bed. I wanted to run around and tell everyone that I'd gone to heaven and that we don't die. The realization set in. If I did this, everyone would think I was insane. I must admit that I was on cloud 9 for months and had the largest smile on my face. I knew. I finally told my 3 children. I've told a few individuals pieces of my experience, but never the complete thing for fear of sounding insane. Being in the light has transformed me in the sense that it has made me more compassionate, understanding, and loving than I was before. When my relationship with Philip ended, I witnessed occurrences that revealed to me where I needed to go next. I was laid off, but I was offered a position in Louisville, Kentucky. I knew I needed to come here. What I didn't realize was that I was visiting a cousin. I observed how God had orchestrated my relocation down here and how He had ensured that I had a relative here to assist me. When I arrived, I told my cousin that I knew I was going to meet someone here, and that someone was Kevin. 5th experience. 2 or 3 weeks before meeting Kevin, I experienced another NDE-like experience. I knew I'd return to heaven, but this time it was surrounded by snow-capped mountains like in Switzerland. I recall having fun in the snow with a man in his late 20s. I couldn't see his face, but I knew his age range and that he adored Switzerland. I'd been on cloud 9 for days when I awoke. A few weeks later, I received an email from Kevin who informed me of his age, which was 28. During our conversation, I discovered that he adored Switzerland. Anyway, as our friendship grew, I posed the subject to him. What color would my soul be if we had different souls? He responded, that's simple. Hot pink. I hadn't discussed these events with him yet, so he had no idea, yet he knew. What an awesome system this is. Kevin and I are pals for life. I kept hearing the term Maitra in my head, and when I asked him what it meant, he claimed it was Sanskrit and meant cool male friend. I'm thinking God wants me to be his friend, and I will be for as long as he needs me, which he is aware of. That's all I've got. Oh, and I haven't aged like other people since I glimpsed the light of God in my bedroom. I'm getting older more slowly and elegantly. It's amazing to look at people and realize that we're more than the sum of our parts, that we know each other, and that we're all here to love each other on our own human journey. Living in the grace of God. Kathy O'Donnell.